The year is 1936. Militarism tightens its grip on Japan. In the shadows, a sinister force is taking shape. This is the story of Unit 731, the Japanese Imperial Army's secret biological and chemical warfare unit. Established near Harbin in Manchuria, Unit 731 was commanded by Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii. A brilliant yet ruthless bacteriologist, Ishii's ambitions knew no bounds. He envisioned a weapon to turn the tide of war in Japan's favor. The complex at Pingfang, disguised as a lumber mill, became a hub for horrific human experiments. Thousands of innocent men, women and children became unwitting subjects in Ishii's experiments. The true nature of Unit 731's activities remained hidden until decades after the war. Survivors were silenced, evidence destroyed, and perpetrators granted immunity for their research data. Through historians, journalists, and survivors, the world is beginning to understand Unit 731's atrocities. Unit 731 aimed to develop and weaponize biological and chemical agents. Ishii believed disease could be a more effective weapon than bombs. Early experiments focused on anthrax, cholera, plague, and typhoid. Test subjects called logs were deliberately infected. Illness progression and effects were meticulously documented. They conducted experiments to inflict maximum agony. These atrocities forever stained the history of medicine and warfare. Central to Unit 731's gruesome experiments was the practice of vivisection, the dissection of living subjects without anesthesia. Men, women, and even pregnant women were strapped to operating tables and cut open, their organs examined and removed while they were still alive. The screams echoing from the laboratories were met with chilling indifference. To Ishii and his team, these victims were nothing more than research subjects, their lives deemed expendable in the pursuit of scientific knowledge. Beyond vivisection, Unit 731 scientists explored a horrifying array of biological weapons and delivery methods. They injected prisoners with lethal doses of bacteria, observing the agonizing progression of the disease. They tested the effectiveness of plague-infected fleas, releasing them into sealed chambers to study their spread and lethality. They even contaminated food supplies with deadly pathogens, intending to airdrop these poisoned rations over enemy lines. These experiments were not merely theoretical exercises. Unit 731 conducted field trials of their biological weapons on Chinese villages, releasing plague-infected fleas and contaminating wells with typhoid and cholera. These attacks resulted in the deaths of thousands of innocent civilians, their suffering dismissed as a necessary sacrifice for the advancement of Japan's wartime goals. Winter's Bite, a weaponized horror. Frostbite experiments. The bitter Manchurian winters provided a chilling backdrop for some of Unit 731's most infamous experiments, frostbite research. Prisoners, stripped naked and exposed to sub-zero temperatures, were subjected to unimaginable agony. Researchers would douse their limbs with water, the freezing liquid turning their skin brittle and black. They documented the different stages of frostbite, meticulously recording the effects on human tissue and bone. These experiments went beyond studying the natural progression of frostbite. Unit 731 researchers wanted to find ways to treat it, not out of compassion for their victims, but to ensure the combat effectiveness of their own soldiers fighting in freezing conditions. They tested various methods of warming frostbitten limbs, often inflicting further pain and injury on their victims. Some were submerged in boiling water. Others had their limbs amputated without anesthesia, their screams echoing through the frozen air. The frostbite experiments stand as a chilling testament to the depths of Unit 731's depravity. These weren't just acts of wartime brutality, they were calculated, systematic attempts to weaponize the very elements themselves, turning the cold, unforgiving Manchurian winter into an instrument of torture and death. Unseen enemies. Unleashed biological warfare in action. Unit 731's horrific experiments were not confined to the laboratory. Ishii and his team saw the vast Chinese countryside as a testing ground for their deadly creations. Under the cover of darkness, they unleashed their arsenal of biological weapons on unsuspecting civilian populations. Plague-infected fleas were dropped from airplanes onto villages, spreading the Black Death with terrifying efficiency. Wells were poisoned with cholera and typhoid, turning a vital resource into a source of agonizing illness and death. Entire villages were decimated, their populations ravaged by diseases that spread like wildfire. The Japanese military observed the aftermath, documenting the death tolls and the spread of infection. These were coordinated campaigns of biological warfare, sanctioned at the highest levels of the Japanese government. The human cost of these attacks is immeasurable.